The battlefield was silent. Smoke floated in the air like gray ghosts. Broken machines and weapons lay everywhere. The war between humans and aliens had ended, but the world was badly hurt. Captain Ryan walked carefully through the ruins. His boots made soft, crunching sounds on the dusty ground. His team followed closely behind him, their eyes sharp, their weapons ready. They had one mission: search for any survivors. Suddenly, a sound stopped them. It was soft, a high, shaky cry. Not human, not machine. Captain Ryan raised his hand. Everyone froze. "Did you hear that?" he asked quietly. The team nodded. Their hearts beat faster. The sound came again, a small, broken cry. It sounded scared and alone. "Over there," shouted Private Mason, pointing towards a broken alien ship half covered in rocks. Captain Ryan moved fast. He pulled away a heavy metal sheet. Underneath, in the shadows, they saw it, a small alien child. Its skin was light blue. Big black eyes stared up at them, full of fear. Tiny hands grabbed a piece of cloth like a blanket. It looked no older than a human toddler. The team stared in shock. "What do we do, sir?" whispered Sergeant Blake. The alien child whimpered and tried to hide. It was shaking badly. It had a wound on its arm. Blood, dark purple, slowly dripped down. Captain Ryan felt a twist in his chest. This was not a soldier. This was just a baby. "Is it dangerous?" asked Mason, lifting his weapon a little higher. Ryan studied the child. No weapon, no threat, just fear and pain. "No," he said firmly. "Lower your guns. It's just a child." The soldiers obeyed, but their faces showed doubt. This was an alien, the same kind that had attacked Earth. "Maybe it's a trap," Blake said carefully. "Maybe the enemy left it to trick us." "Maybe," Ryan agreed. "But we're not monsters." He knelt down slowly. The child watched him, eyes wide, body tense. "It's okay," Ryan said softly. "We won't hurt you." He reached out his hand. At first, the child shrank back. But after a few long seconds, it moved closer. Tiny fingers touched Ryan's glove. It was a small, fragile touch, full of trust. The team looked at each other. Some frowned, some softened. Ryan gently lifted the child into his arms. It was light, almost weightless. "We're taking it back to base," Ryan ordered. "But sir," Mason began. "That's an order," Ryan said sharply. As they made their way back to the transport vehicle, the child buried its face into Ryan's chest, trembling. "Shh," Ryan whispered. "You're safe now." Back at the human base, news spread fast. Humans had rescued an alien child. Some soldiers came to see. They stared with hard, cold eyes. Some whispered angry words. "Why are we helping the enemy? It could be dangerous. Aliens killed my brother, and now we saved theirs." But Captain Ryan stood firm. He took the child to the medical tent. Doctors checked it carefully. The wound was cleaned and bandaged. They found no hidden devices, no threats, just a scared, weak child. The child refused food at first, but after a few tries, it drank some water and ate small pieces of bread. It didn't speak any human language, but the emotions were clear: fear, sadness, loneliness. Captain Ryan watched quietly. "What happened to its parents?" asked Dr. Lee. "No idea," Ryan said. "Maybe killed in the war. Maybe left behind when they escaped." He looked down at the child. It was sleeping now, curled up like a kitten. Ryan felt a heavy sadness. War had taken so much, even from children. That night, as Ryan sat alone outside his tent, he looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, maybe the child's family was still alive, still searching. Or maybe it had no one left. Ryan sighed. He had fought aliens with all his strength. He had lost friends. He had seen cities fall. But here, holding that small blue child, he didn't feel hate. He felt something else. Hope. A small chance that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. Suddenly, a shout came from the guards at the outer fence. Movement outside the base. Many figures. Ryan jumped up. His heart raced. Were the aliens coming back for the child? Were they here for peace or revenge? He didn't know. But he knew one thing. He would protect the child, no matter what. The night grew colder. The wind howled. And deep in the dark, unseen eyes watched the human camp closely. Something was coming. The night was dark and cold. Outside the human base, strange shadows moved between the trees. The guards watched carefully, their fingers ready on the triggers. Captain Ryan stood on the wall, looking through binoculars. In the distance, he could see shapes, tall, thin figures with glowing eyes. Aliens. They were not attacking yet. They were just standing there, silent and still, watching. "What do they want?" whispered Sergeant Blake beside him. Ryan's jaw tightened. He looked back toward the medical tent, where the small alien child, now named Nevi, was sleeping peacefully. "They're here for the child," Ryan said. "I'm sure of it." Inside the base, the mood was tense. Soldiers gathered in small groups, whispering angry words. "We should give the child back," said Private Mason, "before it brings a whole army on us." "Maybe we should," said another soldier. "Why should we risk everything for an alien?" Captain Ryan walked into the room. His face was calm but serious. "We don't hand over children," he said in a strong voice. "Not even alien children." Some soldiers looked away. Some stared back with angry eyes. Fear was growing inside the base, and fear made people dangerous. In the command center, the human leaders argued. General Walters slammed his hand on the table. "We are not babysitters," he shouted. "One alien child is not worth the lives of all our people." "But it's just a kid," argued Dr. Lee. "It's innocent. Innocent or not, the enemy is outside our walls." Walters barked, "And they want it back." Captain Ryan stood up. His voice was steady. "If we give the child back, what does that say about us?" he asked. "That we are cowards. That we have no heart." Silence filled the room. General Walters rubbed his forehead. He looked very tired. "We'll vote," he said finally. "Majority wins." As the leaders voted, Ryan stepped outside. He found Maria sitting by the medical tent, watching Navi sleep. The small alien child clutched a soft blanket and murmured in its sleep. Maria looked up when Ryan approached. "How can they even think of giving him back?" she asked, her voice shaking. Ryan sat down beside her. "They're scared," he said simply. "Fear makes people cruel." Maria nodded slowly. She reached out and gently touched Navi's small hand. The child's fingers wrapped around hers tightly, even in sleep. "I won't let them take him," she said quietly. Ryan smiled sadly. "Neither will I." Later that night, the decision was made. The leaders voted to return the child to the aliens. The announcement hit the base like a thunderclap. Some soldiers cheered, others turned away in shame. Maria stared at Ryan with wide, shocked eyes. "They can't," she whispered. "They're sending him to die." Ryan's face was hard. "I'm not following that order," he said. At midnight, Ryan, Maria, and a few trusted soldiers made a secret plan. They would hide Navi and protect him, even if it meant going against their leaders. They wrapped the sleeping child in a warm blanket and moved quietly through the dark base. Every shadow could hide an enemy. Every sound could bring death. But they didn't stop. Navi stirred once, tiny eyes opening for a moment. When he saw Maria's face, he smiled softly and went back to sleep. As they reached the edge of the base, Ryan gave a signal. A hidden vehicle, a small transport jeep, waited for them. "Quickly," he said, "before they notice." They placed Navi inside. Maria climbed in after him, holding the child close. Ryan took the driver's seat. Just as he started the engine, Loud alarms rang out across the base. They had been discovered. Guards rushed toward them, shouting and firing warning shots into the air. "Stop! Turn back now!" someone screamed. Ryan pressed his foot hard on the pedal. The Jeep roared forward, smashing through the outer gate. Bullets whizzed past them, but they didn't stop. Maria held Navi tighter, whispering, "Stay strong, little one. We'll keep you safe." Behind them, the base grew smaller and smaller. Ahead of them, only darkness and danger waited. But they didn't care. They had made their choice. They would risk everything to save an innocent life. Because sometimes, the greatest battles were not fought with guns. They were fought with hearts. And humanity had chosen kindness, even in the face of fear. But deep in the shadows, unknown to them, a much bigger danger was already waiting. The real test had only just begun. The Jeep sped through the night, bouncing over uneven ground. Captain Ryan's hands were tight on the wheel, his eyes scanning the dark road ahead. The cold wind howled through the open windows. Maria sat in the back, holding Navi close to her chest. The alien child was still asleep, his small form warm against her. "Where are we going?" Maria asked, her voice soft. She couldn't believe they were actually doing this, running from their own people, breaking the rules. "We have a safe house," Ryan replied, his voice steady but tense. "It's far enough from the base. No one will know where we are." Mason, one of the soldiers in the back, turned to look at Maria and Navi. "You sure this is a good idea, sir?" he asked, his voice unsure. "We're going against orders. If we get caught—" "We won't get caught," Ryan interrupted firmly. "We're not stopping until Navi is safe, and I don't care what happens next." Maria glanced down at Navi. His tiny face was peaceful, but she knew the truth. They weren't just running from danger. They were running to save a life. The night seemed endless. As the Jeep rumbled across the empty land, Ryan's mind raced. Every minute, he expected an explosion of gunfire, the roar of enemy ships, or an entire army chasing them down. But nothing happened. Finally, after hours of driving, they reached a small, hidden cabin in the woods. It was old, simple, and isolated, perfect for staying out of sight. Ryan parked the Jeep behind the cabin. He turned off the engine and let out a deep breath. "Here we are," he said. Maria helped Navi out of the Jeep, careful not to wake him. The child was still asleep in her arms, his tiny body warm and fragile. She couldn't believe how quickly she had become attached to him. He was just a child, but in some strange way, he felt like family. Inside the cabin, they set up a small bed for Navi. Ryan kept the lights dim, wanting to keep things as quiet and hidden as possible. Maria sat beside the bed, watching the child sleep. She brushed a strand of hair from Navi's face. The child stirred slightly, but didn't wake up. "Do you think the aliens will find us?" Maria asked softly, not wanting to disturb Navi. Ryan stood by the window, keeping watch. "They'll try," he said, "but we have time. We'll figure something out." Hours passed, and the cabin was quiet. Maria kept an eye on Navi, watching him breathe in and out. He looked so peaceful, so small. She thought about how scared he must have been, alone in the world with no one to care for him. And yet, despite everything, there was something beautiful about the bond she was starting to feel for him. This alien child was not a weapon. He was not a monster. He was just a child, like any human child, with hopes, dreams, and a family he might never see again. The next morning, when the sun finally broke through the trees, Maria decided to check on Navi. He was awake, sitting up, looking around with his wide, dark eyes. For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was just the sound of birds outside and the soft hum of the cabin. Then, without thinking, Maria sat down beside him. She smiled gently. "Good morning, Navi," she said. To her surprise, the child looked at her and gave a small smile back. "Good morning," Maria repeated, though she wasn't sure if Navi could understand her words. Still, The smile felt like a little victory. Days passed in silence. Maria and Ryan kept the cabin hidden, always on the move. But slowly, something began to change between them and the child. Navy started to trust them. Maria noticed small things, how he would reach for her hand when he was scared, how he would smile when he saw her or Ryan. He didn't talk much, but he didn't need to. His actions said everything. One day, when Maria was sitting by the fire, Navi climbed up beside her, tugging at her sleeve. His tiny hands reached out, and Maria picked him up without hesitation. "Do you want to play?" she asked softly. Navy nodded, his eyes bright with excitement. Maria smiled and pulled out a small ball from her pack. It was a simple, red ball, something a human child might play with. She tossed it gently to Navi, and to her surprise, he caught it with both hands. He giggled. The sound was strange but sweet, not like a human laugh, but close enough. "You're good at this," Maria said, laughing with him. The sound of his laughter warmed her heart. It was a moment of peace in the middle of a war, a moment that made everything feel okay. For the first time, Maria felt like they weren't just hiding from danger. They were building something more important. But as they played, Ryan stood at the door, watching them from the shadows. He didn't know what the future held. He didn't know if they would ever be safe. But for the first time in a long time, he saw something pure, something worth fighting for. That night, as they sat around a small fire in the cabin, Maria looked at Ryan. "Do you think we're doing the right thing?" Ryan stared into the fire, his expression unreadable. "I hope so," he said quietly. "I really hope so." But in the distance, the wind carried a message. The enemy was coming closer. And they were not alone anymore. The first signs of a new danger were already approaching. The days at the cabin felt like a dream, a rare moment of peace in a world torn apart by war. The morning sun would rise slowly, casting a soft golden light through the trees. Inside, Maria and Ryan cared for Navi as best they could, trying to keep him safe and happy. But the dream was starting to fade. One morning, as Ryan sat near the fire, he noticed something on the horizon. A small group of figures, humans. They were walking through the forest, making their way toward the cabin. Ryan stood up quickly, his eyes narrowing. He didn't recognize them. And he didn't need to. He knew what this meant. "They found us," he said under his breath. Maria looked at him, her face pale. She had been playing with Navi, but now the smile disappeared from her face. She hugged the child closer to her. "What do we do?" Maria asked, her voice filled with fear. "If they find out about Navi?" "We run," Ryan replied quickly. "We leave before they get here." But just as they turned to gather their things, a voice called out from the trees. "Captain Ryan, we know you're in there." It was General Walter's voice. Ryan's stomach dropped. He knew this moment was coming, but he wasn't ready for it. Ryan stepped outside, keeping his hands visible. He didn't want any sudden moves to be seen as a threat. "General Walters," Ryan called out. "What are you doing here?" Walters stepped into the clearing with a small group of soldiers behind him. His face was tight, serious. "We've been looking for you," Walters said, his voice cold. "And we found you." Ryan's heart raced. He knew what that meant. The general was not here to talk. He was here to take Navi, and possibly bring an end to this. "You can't take him," Ryan said firmly. "He's just a child. He's not a weapon. He's not your enemy." Walters shook his head, his expression hard. "You don't understand, Captain," he said. "The enemy has already attacked us again. They're coming for Earth, and they want their child back." Maria stepped forward, her voice shaking. "We can't give him back. He's innocent. He's a child just like any other." The tension between them grew. Ryan could feel it in his chest, tight and heavy. He had to make a choice that would determine everything. For a moment, Ryan looked at the soldiers standing with Walters. They all had weapons ready. They weren't just here for a negotiation. They were ready for action. "You have two choices," Walters continued, his voice cold and direct. "You can hand over the child, and we'll let you go, or we can take you both back in chains. Your choice, Captain." Ryan felt a cold shiver run down his spine. This was it. There was no more running, no more hiding. He glanced over at Maria. She was holding Navi tightly, her eyes filled with fear. The child had no idea what was happening. He just stared at Ryan with innocent eyes, his tiny hand reaching for Maria. Maria's voice cracked as she spoke. "Please, Captain, you can't let them take him. Please." Ryan felt his heart breaking. He didn't know what to do. On one hand, he could give in, save their lives, and return Navi to the aliens. But he knew that wouldn't solve anything. It would only prove that humanity was willing to give up on the innocent. On the other hand, he could refuse, and that would likely lead to war. A war they couldn't afford. His mind raced. He thought of all the soldiers he had led, all the people who had fought and died. Was one child worth all of this? Was one child worth the future of humanity? "Ryan," Walters said again, his voice firm. "We don't have time for hesitation. We can't risk it." Finally, Ryan took a deep breath. He looked at Maria, who was now holding Navi close, tears in her eyes. He made his choice. "I'm not giving him up," Ryan said quietly but firmly. "I won't be part of this. We'll fight if we have to." Maria looked at him with wide eyes. She could see the fear in his face, but also something else, something powerful. He wasn't just making a decision. He was choosing to fight for what was right. "You're willing to risk everything for him?" Maria whispered. Ryan nodded. "Yes." General Walters' expression darkened. "Then you've made your choice, Captain. But you should know this. The aliens will destroy us for this. You'll never be safe." "I know," Ryan replied. "But if we give up now, what do we have left?" He turned away from Walters, his gaze landing on the cabin and the quiet woods around them. His mind was made up. "Gather your things," Ryan said to Maria. "We're leaving. Now." As Ryan and Maria prepared to run, the sound of alien ships growing closer in the sky made their hearts race. There was no more time. It was now or never. Ryan and Maria climbed into the Jeep, with Navi in Maria's arms. The engines roared to life as they sped off, leaving the soldiers behind. Behind them, the trees shook as alien ships descended, their weapons primed for war. Ryan pushed the Jeep faster, knowing that there was no going back now. The impossible choice had been made. They had chosen to protect the innocent, but they also knew that the road ahead would be dangerous. There was no peace left for them. The alien forces would come for them. They would fight for Navi, for humanity's future, and for the belief that kindness was stronger than fear. But could they survive the coming storm? Only time would tell. The night air was thick with tension as Ryan and Maria drove through the forest, the Jeep bouncing wildly over the uneven ground. The sound of the alien ship's engines echoed in the distance, and each time they heard a roar overhead, Maria tightened her grip on Navi, who was still sleeping in her arms. They had made their choice, but now they were running out of time. Ryan glanced at Maria, his face pale and worn from the long days of fear and uncertainty. His mind raced, thinking of the soldiers they had left behind, the life they had known, and the child they had sworn to protect. "We need to find shelter," Ryan said, his voice low. "Somewhere far from here." Maria nodded, though her eyes were fixed on the road ahead. "But where? The enemy is everywhere." Ryan didn't have an answer. The alien ships were relentless, and the humans who had once been their allies were now the enemy. There was no safe place anymore. Not for them, and not for Navi. Hours passed as they drove through the dark, until they came to a small town on the edge of the forest. The streets were empty, darkened by the lack of electricity. The sound of the wind howled between the buildings, and there was an eerie quiet hanging in the air. Ryan parked the Jeep near an old, abandoned building. "We'll stay here for now," he said. "Keep low. We need to figure out our next move." Maria nodded, and they climbed out of the jeep, careful not to make any noise. Navi, still asleep, was wrapped tightly in a blanket in Maria's arms. Inside the building, it was cold and damp. The walls were cracked, and the floor was covered in dust. It looked like the town had been abandoned for years. But for now, it was their only option. As they settled into the building, Maria laid Navi down on a makeshift bed of old cloth. She tucked him in gently and kissed his forehead, her heart aching as she watched him sleep. "Do you think he'll ever be safe?" Maria whispered, her voice trembling. "Will we ever be able to protect him from all of this?" Ryan sat down beside her, his expression hard. "I don't know," he said quietly. "But I do know one thing. We'll keep fighting for him. As long as we have breath in our bodies, we'll keep fighting." Suddenly, the sound of footsteps broke the silence. Maria froze, her heart pounding in her chest. She grabbed Navi instinctively, holding him close. "Ryan," she whispered, "did you hear that?" Ryan nodded, standing up slowly, his hand on his weapon. He motioned for Maria to stay quiet. The footsteps grew louder, coming closer to the building. Ryan's eyes narrowed as he tried to peer through the cracks in the walls. His heart raced. Could it be the aliens? Were they already here? But then, through the shadows, he saw a figure step into the doorway. It was not an alien. It was a human. The figure stepped into the light, revealing a group of people, soldiers, but they weren't like the others. They weren't part of the government or the military that had betrayed them. Ryan's eyes widened as he recognized one of them. It was Sergeant Blake, the soldier who had been with them back at the base. He looked just as tired and beaten down as Ryan felt, but there was something different in his eyes now, something that wasn't there before. "We're not here to hurt you," Blake said, his voice low and urgent. "We're here to help." Maria stepped forward cautiously, holding Navi protectively. "What do you want?" Ryan demanded. "How do we know we can trust you?" Blake looked at him seriously. "We've been fighting them too. We're not like the others. We know what's at stake. We want to save humanity. And we want to save Navi." Ryan was silent for a moment, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. He glanced at Maria, who was still holding Navi close. "How do we know you're not just another trap?" Ryan asked, his voice skeptical. Blake took a step forward and placed a small device on the ground. It was a simple communication tool. The screen flickered, and a familiar face appeared, General Walters. "Ryan," Walters said, his voice serious but calm. "I know we don't agree on everything, but we're all on the same side now. The aliens are planning something bigger than we can imagine. We need to stop them. We need to work together." Ryan's eyes flickered with disbelief. This was not the Walters he knew, the man who had wanted to give up Navi. This was someone different. Walters continued, his voice full of determination. "Humanity's heart is stronger than fear. If we unite, we have a chance to stop them. It's not just about the child anymore. It's about saving everyone." Ryan felt a surge of hope. For the first time, he felt like there might be a way out of this madness. Blake and the others explained their plan. They would create a safe zone, a place where humans and aliens could come together, a place of peace. It was dangerous, and it would take everything they had, but they had a chance to stop the war before it began. Ryan looked down at Navi, who was still asleep, unaware of everything happening around him. He reached out and gently touched the child's tiny hand. "This is it," Ryan said quietly. "This is the fight we have to win." The battle that lay ahead would be the hardest challenge humanity had ever faced. The enemies were powerful, and the road was uncertain. But in that moment, Ryan understood something deeply. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about what they were willing to fight for. They were fighting for humanity's heart, for kindness, for peace, and for the future of a world that could still be saved. With Navi in their care and a new alliance forming, they set out on their mission. They knew the road ahead would be long and filled with danger, but they also knew that together, they had the strength to face whatever came.